Recorded at the WNDU 16 News Now studios, this is the South Bend Tribune's Pot of Gold Notre Dame Football Podcast. Here are your hosts, columnist Tom Noy, Notre Dame football beat writer Mike Baradino, and WNDU's Jackson Neal.
It's Tuesday, November 19th, the latest edition of Pot of Gold. He's Jackson, he's Mike, I'm Tom. And regardless of how this show goes, we're already winning. You know why?
Why's that?
Because it's November 19th and it's currently 62 degrees outside in South Bend.
It's really nice.
With maybe 4 inches of snow coming on Thursday. Go figure. There you go. So we're going to roll through this real quick because we have a jam-packed show. So this is kind of like the lightning round of Pot of Gold. We'll start with the national rankings for the week of November 17th. Notre Dame in both the U.S. LMB Coaches Poll and the Associated Press Poll. They're both at number 6. The third college football rankings show drops later tonight, Tuesday. We usually tape on Wednesday. Everything's been juggled the next 2 weeks because of the holidays, so we're actually taping this on Tuesday afternoon. CFP projections for Notre Dame as the week started. We'll roll through some of these. The Athletic had Notre Dame at number 9, visiting number 8 Indiana.
Ooh.
ESPN, all 13 college football experts, I put that in quotes, experts, have Notre Dame in their 12-team field. They're ranked anywhere from 8 to 11. SI.com has Notre Dame ranked 6th. Bleacher Report, Notre Dame fans will like this one, has Notre Dame at number 7, hosting number 10 Georgia. And they'll also like the Sporting News one, has Notre Dame at number 8, hosting number 9 Alabama. So anywhere from 7, 8, 9, 10, somewhere around 11, just keep winning.
Yeah.
That's all they got to do. And speaking of winning, Mr. Neal, let's set the stage. It's number 17, Army West Point. That's a new thing. Army is now being referred to as Army West Point.
I don't like that.
It's everywhere. I didn't like it either.
You don't have Navy Annapolis.
We do not have Navy Annapolis.
Air Force Colorado Springs.
And why do we have Army West Point? I don't know. They're 9-0. They're number 17. Notre Dame is number 6 at 9-1. They've won 8 in a row. Series history. We'll get into the series history deeper with one of our guests later in the show. Notre Dame leads the all-time series 39-8-4. First meeting since 2016. Notre Dame is 24-5-3 at neutral sites, as this will be at Yankee Stadium on Saturday night. The Irish have won 15 straight in the series. Last Notre Dame win, last game, 2016 Shamrock Series in San Antonio, 44-6. Last Army win, Jackson, I don't think you were around for this one.
A little before my time.
1958, 14-2 at Notre Dame Stadium. The Irish hit a 2-run homer in the bottom of the third. They lose 14-2. And the last meeting, also at Yankee Stadium, 2010, Notre Dame wins 27-3. And as Marcus Freeman was quick to point out to his staff earlier this week, Mike Berdino, this is not Navy 2.0.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of schematics, I mean, it's easy with the 30,000-foot view to say, well, it should be kind of beneficial to see a Navy triple option and an Army triple option largely in a 4-game span, but maybe not as simple as that. Bryson Daly does some things differently than Blake Horvath. Remember Heisman Horvath? And
how'd that turn out? He got hurt against Tulane. They lose 35-0.
So it's going to be, there's going to be a lot of compare and contrast leading into and covering this game because Navy was a team that supposedly did not fumble, and all they did was fumble that day. It was just a goofy day. Army takes care of the football. That's it's all about the discipline. 3 total turnovers, just 1 interception by this Bryson Daly, who is from basically a suburb of Lubbock, Texas. It's Abernathy, out there.
20 miles north of Lubbock. Yeah. No stoplights in Abernathy, Texas.
Oh, well, I would have guessed
Zero
maybe one.
No, 0.
But I guarantee you they got $2 generals. So this Bryson Daly is a second-year starter for them, and he does some things a little bit differently. The challenge for Marcus Freeman, every week that's a challenge, and this season no more than ever, but more than ever, because he's got to put a little scare into these guys, and they cannot look ahead to USC. Cannot, even though even the great Jack Kaiser, who is all in, right? All the chips are in. He spoke in terms of this 2-week stretch, the biggest stretch of our lives, and I was stunned to hear that, because that is anathema.
That's not good.
That is not acceptable
good.
around the Goog, because they are all one play, one life, at one service academy at a time, and don't worry about the underachieving Big Ten team later.
Jackson, you look at some of these stats at Army, and it's a little intimidating, and not necessarily, even more so, a little intimidating, a little impressive. When you look at number one rush offense in the country, 334.9 yards per game. Number one team in pass efficiency in the country at 187.91. And then this is where it really gets hard for Notre Dame this week. Total defense, they're ranked 5th in the country, giving up 273 yards per game. And then they're the 3rd-ranked rush defense in the land, allowing teams an average of only 82.6. You roll down some of these other numbers for Army. They're ranked 2nd, they're ranked 6th, they're 6th, they're 2nd. They're 1st in red zone defense. This is not going to be as easy of a game as the last time they went to the New York City area across the Hudson in the Meadowlands, is it?
No, it's not. I mean, you look at down this Army roster, there's legitimate talent in this roster. I'm looking at someone like Kanye Udo, their running back, a player that actually from my area of South Jersey, from the premier.
That's why you're looking at it.
Yeah, that's the premier prep program from there was a pretty solid recruit coming out of there. Obviously Bryson Daly, but it's just the consistency with which they play. You look at Daly, that one interception last year, I think it was like 7 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Not turning the ball over, taking care of it, not making any little mistakes. And in college football, that will have you at the top of these efficiency rankings like they are. It's good. It's hard to find flaws in Army, if that makes any sense. They don't really do anything wrong. They're just consistently good.
You mentioned taking care of the ball. Against North Texas, the last time Army played, they had a bye the last week, so they've been off since North Texas on November 9th. All Army did was throw together a 21-play, 94-yard drive that, oh, by the way, took up almost 14 minutes of game time. So
it's a quarter.
Army does that on Saturday. The Irish are going to have their hands full at Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at Notre Dame sometimes. I mean, every so often, like they got that Virginia game this past week, just these stretches of like not much going on for Notre Dame. And eventually they turn it on, but there was just kind of these 1 or 2 3-and-out possessions, 2 or 3 punts here and there. If you do that against Army, that's going to be all you have for an entire half. You don't get many chances at that football.
The caveat with Army, yes, they're undefeated. Yes, they're 9-0. Yes, they're ranked. Yes, you have all these categories where they're 1st and 3rd and 5th and 2nd and 6th in the country in this category or that category. But then you look at their schedule. Lehigh, Florida Atlantic, Rice, Temple.
There we go.
Temple, Tulsa, UAB, East Carolina, Air Force is down, and North Texas. Safe to say, Army has not seen a team that they're going to see, like they haven't seen a team this season like they're going to see in Notre Dame on Saturday.
So we talk about Notre Dame's strength of schedule being a drag on its ability to secure that higher seed in the college football playoff, and Notre Dame's now 82nd in the country's strength of schedule. Took a little bit of a hit last week, went down 9 spots because Louisville messed up, and someone else did too. So Army is 2nd worst in the country in the schedule. The 2nd easiest schedule in the country so far. Only Liberty this year, not good, is lower. And the football percentage index there on the ESPN has Army at 48 in the country, and Notre Dame is 4 in the country. So, there's a gap. I asked Marcus Freeman about the talent gap closing, perhaps, and I was a little surprised that it's possible that they didn't try to recruit any of these fellas. Obviously, some different objectives.
He wasn't ready to roll down that Army roster and talk about
it was
who he may or may not have recruited on.
And I understand because he's just looking at the numbers right now, and I think that's it's a need to know basis. It's a need to know basis. The son of a career military man. But I remember when UNLV came in here and he talked about Ricky White. They'd recruited him at Cincinnati and a couple other players on the UNLV roster, and there was story time because there's so much crossover, and because Notre Dame it recruits nationally, and so does Army. And sometimes these service academies in this era, especially where I've lost count whether I currently have lost track whether they can defer their 5-year service commitment to go play a little pro ball because it ebbs and flows. It depends on who's in power. But that has affected things because there is that possibility to be a recent graduate of a service academy and then suddenly be in the NFL for a few years until you're done with that, and then you go back. There's guys pitching for the Minnesota Twins like that, Griffin Jacks from Air Force. But no, there were no off the top of the head crossovers, even though Army, I will tell you, this is interesting. I mean, they have 30 guys, by my count, 30 guys on this roster from Texas.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
That is.
They know how to play football in Texas.
Just a little bit.
I mean, I know every state gets this. They make sure that every state's represented in the service academies, but to end up with 30 guys on your roster, a third of it roughly being from the football state of Texas, that bodes well. And for what Army's trying to do to get up to this next level. The other thing is Army's thrown a scare in recent years at Michigan, throwing a scare in recent years at Oklahoma, hasn't quite. And we'll talk about this with our first guest, but hasn't quite had that breakthrough signature win that they can just say this is what they can do if you're not careful. They don't have that. They certainly didn't have it last year at LSU, and Mike Denbrock as the coordinator, 62-0.
This is a Shamrock Series game being played also at Yankee Stadium. I may have missed it, but did Notre Dame at any point in the offseason or during this season trot out the uniforms that they're going to
Yes.
They did.
They did.
You might have been on vacation, but I wrote that was a little TTP with that.
That was on
blue and gray unis.
I was going to say, is it more like the pinstripes like
No.
when they played the
Oh,
last
you haven't
time?
seen it?
I haven't. That's why I haven't. I didn't know whether or not this was going to be a special uniform game or not.
It is. What do you think? What'd you think of the blue-gray?
I liked it, and I liked the font of like the numbers is kind of like the like a newspaper font, throwing back to like the New
Grantland
York,
Rice.
Yeah, throwing back to Grantland Rice. So I thought it was good, just as long as there's no pinstripes. I was not a fan of those.
You didn't
No
like that?
pinstripe helmets.
No, I was not. That was not my favorite.
Yeah, I'm looking at a picture of them here. Let's see. Where is it?
Outlined against a blue-gray.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're acceptable.
Yeah, they're solid.
Let's roll. I'd rather roll with these than the uniforms that, for whatever reason, they decided to wear white pants in Atlanta.
The
Against
icy
Georgia
white
Tech.
at Vegas was
Those are
pretty
nice.
cool.
I like those.
But you have to go all white, not just white pants.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
gotta commit to it.
12th season of the Shamrock Series that started in 2009. You could win some bets with this question of who was the first Shamrock Series opponent for the University of Notre Dame and where did they play? Did you read my notes? See, he didn't read the notes.
I have the notes
'Cause
pulled
it's
up,
in the
so
notes.
I know they've never lost one.
They've never lost one. The first Shamrock Series game was 2009 in the Alamo Dome against that vaunted Notre Dame opponent, Washington State.
interesting.
So there has not been a Shamrock Series game in 2017, 2019, 2020 because of the pandemic, and then also 2023. The next Shamrock Series scheduled Shamrock Series game will be Lambeau Field against Wisconsin in 2026. That is a reschedule, I believe.
Yes,
from
that was
2020.
That was a reschedule. They were supposed to play in 2020. They had to kind of move it with all that.
And if you had to pick, gentlemen, one place you want to play want to go cover a Shamrock Series game, where would it be? Doesn't matter who the opponent is.
Rome.
Good luck with that, getting that through the budget.
I mean,
I think only one guy's going to Rome, and that would
Paris,
be you.
second.
I guess these are good answers. I would agree with those.
Berlin.
How about stateside? There's only one answer for that.
What'd you say?
I said there's only one answer for stateside.
Where they should go, where they haven't been yet.
I'm going SoFi Stadium.
Oh,
That is a pretty cool statement.
That is-
They do play in
Right.
L.A.,
Right.
as you know.
Well,
I was thinking maybe-
then play the Shamrock Series game in a year that you have USC in South Bend, so you don't make two trips down.
Oh, that's interesting.
that's
yeah.
smart. You could do that.
It's a good one.
For stick with baseball, Fenway Park. That's always fun.
We were just talking about one that has not happened yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pittsburgh or San Francisco, those ballpark baseball stadiums are very scenic. And if
The
you're
San
gonna-
Francisco, that could be cool with like the water
with
right
the
there.
McCovey Cove.
Yeah. I think I like that one. Actually.
Would you play in San Francisco or
I'd
would
play-
you play in Santa Clara?
Play Stanford in whatever they're calling AT&T Park there.
Play it in the baseball stadium.
Yeah.
There you go.
I like that one. Yeah.
That's nice. So we'll see what happens. We'll have more talk of Army and Navy. A lot more talk with Army and Navy, and then also start thinking about your hot takes and your predictions. We'll come back right after this, and we will talk Army Navy with our first Army Navy guest right here on the Pot of Gold. Back on the pot of gold, back previewing Army and Notre Dame coming up Saturday night from Yankee Stadium. We bring in Ken Kreitzer from the West Point Football Report. Ken, tell us a little about this Army team. How impressive has it been what they've done not only this year but carrying over last year where they started this 12-game win streak?
Yeah, it's been remarkable. They won the last four with a big upset win at Air Force. Kind of started it after they lost a couple of games at LSU and at home at Massachusetts. They made a huge turnaround. They won a couple more home games, and then they beat Navy at Gillette Stadium to win the Commander-in-Chief Trophy, which makes everybody happy at West Point. You win the Commander-in-Chief Trophy, that's a successful season. And they went to the White House. I went with them in May, received the trophy from President Biden. And so they didn't go to a bowl game. This year, they went into the year with an established quarterback in Bryson Daly, and he's only elevated his game. Army used to have a couple of big fullbacks. You may remember Tyson Riley, Jacoby Buchanan. These guys were 270 pounds, and they never got stopped on 4th and 1, whoever it was. But they both graduated, serving in the Army now. And really what's happened is they have Kanye Udo, who's really a halfback. He's a sophomore, but he's running terrific. But it's all about Bryson Daly. He really is a fullback playing quarterback, if you can imagine that. And he's got 21 touchdowns on the year, over 1,000 yards rushing. He averages about 125 yards a game. He's in the Heisman discussion. Great kid. He signed up. He wants to be an infantry officer in the Army. And that's what's special about these players. The end of November, early December, they have a night called Branch Night at West Point. Every Army senior gets an envelope with a branch of the U.S. Army in it that they're assigned to. They may request it, but it's still a matter of chance. There's 18 branches in the Army. And so Bryson Daly is open for infantry to become an infantry officer. So, that's why we love covering Army. I've been doing it 15 years. Best thing I ever got involved with.
You talk a lot about their offense, but how impressive has it been what they've been able to do defensively and basically not allowing teams to run on them almost at all this season?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is the offense it's been pretty good at holding on to the ball through the year, but the two inside linebackers, Andon Thomas and Caleb Fortner, have been terrific. They both have over 55 tackles on the season, so they plug the middle up really well. And Nate Woody is the defensive coordinator. He's just a marvel. We talked to him. We'll talk to him tomorrow night. And he just eats, sleeps, and breathes defense. And he looks at every offense as a challenge on how he's going to stop it. And I know he's been he won't talk about it, but he's been thinking about Notre Dame all winter and, and summer, watching the tape. And so he's going to be ready. But they've just been amazing. They get really tough in the red zone. The last two games, they stopped Air Force from scoring a touchdown. And down in North Texas, they stopped them. They'd have a goal line stand. North Texas had a 1st and goal at the 7, and Army stopped it. And they just get really tough in the red zone. And, that's been, a key to their success. But we didn't expect the defense to be this good. They have 3 young players in the secondary with the senior Max DiDomenico, and who's been playing great to really stop the offenses in the American Athletic Conference and Air Force too.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Ken, I asked Marcus Freeman about this yesterday, and I would like to hear your take on because Freeman would have seen and did see for a very compelling game as a Cincinnati defensive coordinator in 2020, Army, and that was a 1-score game in halfway through the 4th quarter, and it ended up 24-10. I wondered about the talent gap that he can see on film. Some of his assistants have seen Army more recently. Mike Denbrock was with LSU last year. But what have you seen in the ability to become more athletic, to cut maybe the speed gap? We know the discipline's always there. We know the physicality's always there. But in terms of staying on the field with a top 10 national team like Notre Dame, What do you think if they just lined them up athlete for athlete? How much has that narrowed just in the last 4 or 5 years?
Well, Coach Monken always says that, the other teams they play would win the 100-meter dash competitions or he used to say he never would be able to recruit a player who might go to a school like Notre Dame. But what he has now is he's got continuity. And that's what's lacking, I think, in a lot of teams in college football today are players who've been in the system 3-4 years. The coach of Florida Atlantic said that after the Army game. He had 50 transfers, and Army's playing juniors and seniors that have been in the program for 4 or 5 years. So that's what Army brings, is they know exactly what they're going to do on offense. And they got, the offensive line is a lot bigger for West Point than you might have seen 5, 6, 7, or 8 years ago. They're all around 300 pounds. Brady Small, the center, is only a sophomore, and he's played remarkably well. He played as a freshman. He played all but one game he was out hurt. And, and then they have Connor Finucane, who is a fifth-year player. He was a captain last year, but he came back. He had to, because of injuries, he couldn't complete all of the military West Point physical requirements to graduate. You have to get through physical fitness tests and swimming tests and the like. And he had some injuries, so he had to stay over to this fall to finish that and finish his degree. So the superintendent was so impressed with how he handled himself and was training some of the younger cadets that he said, you can play, he granted a fifth year of to play this year. So he only moved into right tackle at the middle of August. Fellow named Jordan Laws had a great season, was very gracious about it. And Connor Finucane came in at like 240, and we're not quite sure what his weight is now. But every time I see him, he's a little bit bigger. He's drinking all the milkshakes and whatnot to put the weight back on. Because one of the things at West Point for the offensive linemen is as soon as their senior season is over, they're supposed to downsize so that they can be in Army shape. It's a big difference to be in Army shape, to be able to complete the 2-mile run requirement, or to be able to carry a backpack, a 75-pound backpack, by the way, 15 miles, in a training exercise, and be able to lead your young soldiers, which means don't show that it's any bit of an effort, because you're trying to get them to be able to handle those kind of things. So Connor Finucane's been a big addition, and the offensive line has just played superbly. Lucas Scott, right tackle, Paolo Generale is a sophomore, Bill Catianis at the left guard. They've very seldom had any injuries this year. And Army's got a tough stretch coming up now, playing Notre Dame, and then Texas San Antonio, and then playing Tulane in the American Athletic Conference championship game, and then a bowl game not too soon after. And you know what you got to remember, guys? They have exams, and Notre Dame does too. And that's one of the factors, people kind of forget. It used to be December, was they let the football teams, have some time for exams. That's sort of going away. And everybody's got to keep in mind. I mean, you have real students at Notre Dame, and everybody there is going for a degree.
And then this all Army offense specifically, Ken, I mean, one thing we're looking at with Bryson Daly is the 7 touchdowns, but only 1 interception. Last year had 6 interceptions. Kind of how have you seen, you could describe him as a fullback playing quarterback. How have you seen him progress as a passer specifically? Because usually we're always talking about the running game with Army, but throwing the ball, they're able to do that as well this year.
Well, the key for Bryson is they have a run-oriented offense. And there have been games where they pass the ball once or twice. We've seen games where they won where they didn't pass the ball at all. But what he's looking for is the key for when the defense, the safeties start cheating up, or the cornerbacks start cheating up, and he's going to call the play for one of the wideouts to go deep over the middle, and he knows how to get that pass out to him. And that's what he's looking for, and that's what I'm sure the Notre Dame defense is talking about. Army knows how to see that the defense is cheating to stop the run, and we'll send a man deep down over the middle or the side. A fellow named Noah Shorts made a couple of big plays like that this year, Cam Sure. And that's the thing. Army has snuck in on a few teams this year, and Bryson knows how to deliver the ball.
Ken, we'll get you out of here on this one. I know you're short on time, but even with the schedule that Army has played this year, it really hasn't been challenged by a team that they're going to be challenged like the way they're going to be challenged on Saturday. What is it about Army that you know they're going to answer the moment on Saturday at Yankee Stadium against the 6th-ranked team in the country at Notre Dame?
Well, I remember what the center for Army said when they went out to play Oklahoma a few years ago, and they took them in overtime. And I said to him after, you're leading your team up to the line of scrimmage, and the team on the other side of the ball, their uniforms say Sooners on it. You've been watching those guys on television for years and years. And he said to me, we just consider that they're wearing red uniforms, and that's it. And they're going to look at Notre Dame the same way. They're going to wear, I assume, blue uniforms on Saturday night.
Blue gray,
okay.
special ones. Special. Grantland Rice.
But that's what they're going to look at. And the most impressive victory for Army this year was at Florida Atlantic, second game of the year. They went down there and they decided to play the game at 12 noon. It's 90 degrees out in Boca Raton, Florida. It was, I don't know what temperature on the turf. Half the crowd didn't show up. It was so hot. But Army showed up and they wore their all black uniforms, black helmets, black jerseys, black pants, and smoked them. And, I thought they'd have trouble in the second half. Bryson Daly said it was the hottest condition you ever played in, but they persevered. And I thought that was the most impressive win. Obviously, beating Air Force is always a positive. They've been pretty consistent. But they're just going to go out and play their brand of football, try to minimize mistakes, and they will play well. There are going to be a lot of Army fans that, are buying up tickets where they can. And, Yankee Stadium is special. I was there for the World Series a month ago, and I've been to the Pinstripe Bowl. And I was at actually the 2010 Army-Notre Dame game at Yankee Stadium. Notre Dame went out to a big lead. But, I'll tell you, the Army defensive captain at the time, Steve Anderson, said to me later, he said to his team in the second half, forget the scoreboard, just play football the way you know how to play. He only gave up one touchdown in the second half.
There you go. Ken Kreitzer, West Point Football Report. We appreciate the time. We appreciate the insight into Army heading into Saturday's game against Notre Dame at Yankee Stadium.
Hey, Ken,
great to see you guys.
If people want to find your work as well, on Twitter at KG Kreitzer, KRAETZER Media, and anywhere else they should look?
And under CamVets Media, our media group is called CamVets Media, that stands for Cadets, Midship, and the Military and Veterans that we've covered proudly since 2008.
Awesome. Thank you, Ken.
There you go. Ken, thanks for your time.
Guys.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
In our continuation of previewing Army Notre Dame this weekend from Yankee Stadium in New York City, we bring in Rich Cassiope, who is the author of Black Knights and Fighting Irish, a rivalry, a game, and America 1 year after the end of World War II. Rich joins us now live. There is a copy of his book. Rich, Army, Notre Dame, Yankee Stadium, what does it mean to you?
Oh, it means a lot to me. And I have a personal connection because I was a plebe in 1958, the last time that Army beat Notre Dame, when we had the Lonesome End and Pete Dawkins and an undefeated nationally ranked team. And to see my team again restoring the glory that was once Army football is terrific.
What is it about Army that you believe that they'll give Notre Dame a challenge on Saturday at Yankee Stadium? 9-0 this year, nationally ranked. They haven't really played as tough of a schedule as Notre Dame, but what is it about Army that you know that the Irish might be in for a game on Saturday?
I think that's true. Those are guys that we have been grooming at the military academy for the better part of 4 years. They understand the heritage that they represent, and they've been trained that winning or coming in second in any endeavor is not a good deal. So they've been really, it's been drilled into their head that no matter what the odds or no matter what the popular opinion is, they're going to come and play their heart out. Rich,
this matchup was linked up to the 100th anniversary of the Four Horsemen game, 1924, obviously, and in your book, as you sketch out the rivalry history and I want to jump ahead in a bit to 1946 and then the end of the rivalry of that period, the glory days. But 1924, what's something then your research that you were that you think is kind of lost in the mist of time, or that you want to highlight at this time? As of course, one of the facts is that 1924 game was not at Yankee Stadium; it was at the Polo Grounds. But what's something about the Four Horsemen in particular that strikes you all these years later?
Well, two things. One is that of the Four Horsemen, the heaviest player on that team was Elmer Layden at 162 pounds. So he was the biggest back of the Four Horsemen. The second thing is that in spite of Grantland Rice's wonderful prose about how you can't contain a tornado or a hurricane or whatever he described, it was really great prose. But that game was a 13-7 game. If you read his prose and didn't know the score, you would have thought it was maybe a big rout. But it turned out to be 13-7, which was really similar to most of the games that Army and Notre Dame played. I think Notre Dame won 22. 13 of them were 7 points or less. So those were very hard-fought games, and they were very close, and they captured the imagination of the American public. And as I say in my book, and as I say to people who ask me about it, it was the premier rivalry from the 20s and the 30s and into 1946. And it was that way because both of those teams had a national following. At a time when Eastern football was pretty dominant and Yale and Harvard had the attention of the people in the Northeast, there were two teams that had captured the interest of fans across the country. One, Army, because it drew its student body from every congressional district in the country. And two, Notre Dame, because it was a beacon of affirmative activity for Catholics across the country at a time when there was an anti-Catholic bias in the country. So those two teams, of all the teams that played during those years, commanded a very loyal and outspoken fan base that was national in stature.
I'd like to follow up too. Now let's jump ahead to the 40s, because that 1946, that was the game of the century, let's say, for the first half of the century. And then amazingly, Notre Dame, Florida State, 1993 might have been game of the century, second half of the century. But that 46 game, 0-0 tie. But there's so much talent on the field, so much anticipation for that. You lay out in your book how many All-Americans, how many future pros, of course, Heisman winners, Mr. Inside, Mr. Outside. But to get to that point, maybe explain, because I didn't realize this, explain to folks kind of they had a transfer portal going for Army during World War II, and they could get the pick of the litter. They were raiding, in the name of national security, I suppose, and football, some high-end schools for their top talent. Explain what people should know about the wartime transfer portal.
Sure. And the wartime college football makes today's transfer portal look downright benign, because there were no eligibility rules. The Navy had formed in 1942 a V program where they did ground training for Marine Corps and Navy pilots. So these young midshipmen or young lieutenants in the Marine Corps would spend a year at one of 131 universities across the country. And during that 1 year, they could engage in all student activities to include college football. So some college football teams had professional football players playing on them, or they had somebody who'd been an All-American at Purdue and all of a sudden was now playing for Iowa pre-flight. Interestingly, Great Lakes Naval beat Notre Dame. Great Lakes Naval beat Notre Dame 2 years out of 3 during that time. So yes, you're right. Army had its way with the recruiting system, because Coach Blake, understanding that, armed his coaches to go out with appointments in hand to really the best players in the country and say, you're an 18-year-old, you're going to get drafted. I got a place where you can go, and you're guaranteed a berth for 3 years, which was unusual. 18-year-olds were getting drafted. We had a population of 130 million, 15 million in uniform. So if you were an 18-year-old, you were going to go. So Blake took advantage of it. And so much so that in 44 and 45, Army beat Notre Dame 59-0 and 48-0. And so there was a war cry in 46 as the war ended. The student body and even the team started to say 59 and 48. This is the year we retaliate. That was their war cry. Today we call a returning veteran somebody who played last year. In 1946, a returning veteran was a guy who might be on the football team who had been at the Battle of the Bulge or at Iwo Jima. So there was strong emotion for that game because it represented a throwback to the days before the war and before all the hardship that the war had brought on. So the fan base revived itself and came and wanted to seek revenge for those two anomalies that had occurred in 44 and 45. Matter of fact, the Subway alumni was so vociferous when the Corps of Cadets got off the train in the Bronx, they came down from West Point to go to the Yankee Stadium for that 1946 game. When they got off the train, the Subway alumni jeered them as being draft dodgers because they had spent the war years at West Point, and about 54 of the Notre Dame players, to include Coach Leahy and Johnny Lujack, had been in the service. So there was the end of the war rivalry. There was a hope that we were going to get back to normalcy, and there was certainly a debt to be paid.
And then, Rich, when you kind of describe this rivalry, 1920s, 1930s, 1940s as a premier rivalry. And we're talking about the 46 game, the 1924 game. What are maybe some other moments in your research, some other games or moments or plays that really stood out to you that people should know about in those decades between these two teams?
Well, the 1913 game, which was the start of the whole series, when both Army and Notre Dame by chance had an open spot on their schedule, and by between an exchange of letters from the new coach at Notre Dame and the team manager at Army, who was a big powerhouse in the East, and Notre Dame was an unknown small school from the Midwest, small Catholic school from the Midwest. So by chance, the two stars aligned, and Notre Dame came out to Army. Interestingly enough, they didn't have much of a budget. So Army agreed to pay them $1,000. Notre Dame brought about 20 players out who carried their own equipment. The cafeteria made sandwiches for them on their way. Their total bill was $848, so they made about $150 on the trip, which was a big deal for them. And then because of the movie Newt Rockne, All-American, the movie portrays that Army was a little lead-footed, and Notre Dame took advantage of them with the pass that Army had not expected, and that's untrue. Army was a pretty good utilizer of the pass offense itself. So there were some myths that movie, that 1940 movie with Ronald Reagan put into effect that took a while to undo.
Hollywood embellished?
No.
What
Yeah.
you would think?
Well, and that 1940 movie was the world premiere of that 1940 movie was in South Bend, Indiana. That
Yep.
was the height of Hollywood's periods of greatness, and yet the producers sought to have the world premiere at 3 theaters in South Bend, and the president's son came, Rudy Valley came, Ronald Reagan came. It was really a star-studded evening.
Rich, in researching the book and writing the book and finishing the book, what made it all worthwhile for you when you were finally done and said, that's the reason why I decided to go down this rabbit hole between Army and Notre Dame?
Well, that's maybe the most pertinent question for me as a writer. Two things. One is the similarities between the two schools is just striking. Army is duty, honor, country. Notre Dame is God, country, Notre Dame, and both of them, if you do some research, find out that they made enormous commitments and enormous sacrifices during both World Wars, World War I and World War II. And so the similarities of two men's schools growing up on rivers about an hour away from major cities, the similarities are really very glaring. The second thing is, though, the total euphoria of the population in anticipating this 1946 game, because the country had just come through 11 years of a depression, and about the time we started to come out of the depression, we got into World War II. So we had basically about 15 years of hardship. And for the researching the euphoria and the relief and the happiness of the population to once again witness a simple event like a football game without worrying about going home and finding a telegram from the War Department that you lost a loved one. So this was kind of like an exclamation point on the return to normalcy for the population, which had suffered so greatly in both the Depression and in the war.
One of the things, too, that struck me and that people should recall is that 1946 national championship for Notre Dame, well, they come out of a 0-0 tie, number 2 in the country. Army was number 1, and it stayed that way for the rest of the regular season, a few more weeks. And as you tell in your book, Army was, I suppose, unimpressive, a little lucky to survive Navy, and they flipped. They flipped the final poll, which was taken right at the end of the regular season for quite a while. Notre Dame was elevated, even though the game of the century itself did nothing to prove superiority between the two. If anything, it seems that could have been a shared national championship. But that struck me. And then a comment that will live in history, Earl Red Blake saying after the 0-0 tie, we will never have, speaking of Army, we will never have another chance to beat Notre Dame again. And it's proven almost exact because it's only happened one other time, the 1958 game. Why do you think he said that? What did he know? And you, as you recount so well in your book, what happened subsequently to end the series. But why do you think he said that?
Well, I think it was clear he knew the jig was up, that the recruiting advantage was going to go away, and that he was not going to be able to compete for the athletes that he needed. And the second thing, though, that happened was that was striking and a surprise was that the series at the peak of its popularity was ended because there had been a lot of animosity. Not a lot, but there had been animosity about some of the players and the recruiting during the war years, and certainly the conduct of the Subway alumni. Really, Maxwell Taylor, who was the superintendent at West Point, was very upset that it was going to tarnish the reputation of the Army, which was really had just come through and succeeded in its war efforts, and was worried about that its reputation was going to be tarnished because of football. So unexpectedly, Notre Dame, after Army was national champs in 44 and 45, they had the same record at the end of the 46 season, but as you point out, they really had a tough go against 1-9 Navy, and Notre Dame really ran over USC in some of its remaining games, so they were chosen as national champs. Interestingly, both Blake and Leahy were chosen as coach of the year because nobody wanted to let go of that little plum. But those two announcements at the end of the season were very surprising to all of and disappointing to the fans. One, that it was a 0-0 tie, and two, that the series was at its end.
Newt Rockne went 105, 12, and 5 with 3 national championships at Notre Dame. Red Blake went 166, 48, and 14 with 3 national championships at Army. Who was the better coach?
I don't show this to any of my Army friends, but I like Leahy. I like his life story, and I like what an interesting guy he was, and I like the way he. In 43, when he saw all of his boys going off to the war, he said, in order for me to be able to relate to these guys when they come back, I need to go off to the war as well. Now, he took advantage of his assignment. His assignment was as a physical instructor for the submarine force, and they gave him an airplane, and he flew all over the Pacific and used part of his time to recruit players like a number of players that he recruited. Jim, who was the ferocious end, who was a Navy SEAL.
Jim Martin, I think, yeah.
He used it to fly all over the Pacific to get those combat-hardened guys to come back to Notre Dame. So that story is an interesting one. Coach Blake became a lieutenant colonel, but stayed at West Point throughout the war.
You had we'll let you go here in a bit, but you had one fact, one stat in there that astounds me if I bring it into modern terms, and tell me if my math is right here. Make sure I remember this. You said that annual game at Yankee Stadium, Notre Dame and Army, would put about $200,000 a year at that time in the Notre Dame coffers, and the endowment, the total school endowment, was only $4 million at the time, so 5%. The endowment, you well know, has risen all the way to $20 billion today. So to put it in proper perspective, imagine if this one game that Notre Dame and Army will play at Yankee Stadium on Saturday was a $1 billion event, because that's how it felt overall. If you're at Notre Dame trying to stay solvent, trying to just stay open in business, it meant everything. It was 5% of your total endowment. That I think that I had that right, and that's in your book. It's great,
yes.
great
Yes.
fact that it just astounds to this day.
Oh, yeah. Well, the Warriors were very lean for Notre Dame. As a matter of fact, Father Hesburgh said, had it not been for that Navy V program in 1942, that Notre Dame financially might have gone under. And that's when he made the commitment that he would play Navy as long as Navy wanted to play Notre Dame, because he was very outspoken about the support that they got by having that Navy program.
Rich, for those who want to learn more about your book, want to get a copy of your book, where would they be able to find that?
Either Amazon or Barnes & Noble online.
There you go.
And
Rich,
put in Black Knights and Fighting Irish and my last name. They'll be able to find it easily.
Rich Cassiope, Black Knights and Fighting Irish, a rivalry, a game, and America 1 year after the end of World War II. Appreciate the time, and we'll see what happens on Saturday.
Thanks so much for having me.
You got it. All right, Irish Rewind. Notre Dame 35, Virginia 14. That's all that we need to say about that. Jackson, let's go to Pot of Old. We're moving on. we're moving on from that game. There's nothing to talk about. I didn't
Not
even
even the fake punt?
Nope, we're not talking about that. Pot of Old, we're going to stay with Army and Notre Dame, 1995. Let's see where you were in this date, Mr. Berardino.
What? When?
It is October 14th, 1995. Number 17, Notre Dame 28, Army 27, and it is the game where the legend of Irish cornerback Ivory Covington was born. No overtime back then. Army drives down, scores a late touchdown in the closing seconds. They say, forget the extra point and tying the game. We're going for 2 points. And the quarterback, I believe it was Ronnie McAda, was covering Notre Dame for Irish Sports Report back then, hits the tight end, Ron Lashinsky, at basically the 1 yard line. And all Ron Lashinsky has to do, he's 6'3", 240 pounds, going up against Ivory Covington, who maybe on a good day was 5'9", 161 at corner. All Lashinsky has to do is catch the ball, turn over his left shoulder, basically fall into the end zone. And Army beats Notre Dame at Giant Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey. But Ivory Covington comes up, makes the tackle of his life, basically, for Notre Dame, stops Ron Lashinsky, doesn't get into the end zone. Notre Dame survives, 28, Army 27. Notre Dame was outgained that day, 407 to 355. Autry Denson, the leading rusher in Notre Dame football history, went 23 carries, 111 yards for 2 touchdowns, but it was the play at the end, Ivory Covington making the tackle, heard round Notre Dame Nation as the Irish survived 28-27, October 14th, 1995. Where were you, Mike Berardino?
Thanks for extending that research period for me. Because I think 95. I think Atlanta Braves World Series, and but they were still in the National League Championship Series, and I'm going to tie this into modern Notre Dame in a way that Jackson's mind will be blown.
Let's see it.
Okay,
let's see
so
it.
October 14th, 1995, the Atlanta Braves. I was at Atlanta Fulton County Stadium as the Braves closed out a 4-game series sweep of the Cincinnati Reds, 6-0. Cincinnati, as Pete Rose would say it. And Steve Avery, the lefty who had great slider, He's from Michigan, Taylor, Michigan. He got the win. And the Cincinnati Reds general manager is a young gun, brash fella, quoted a lot in Peter Gammon's Sunday Notes, named Jim Bowden.
Yes.
You know who Jim Bowden's son is, right?
Look at Jackson.
Come on.
Off the top of my head, no. Off the top of my
Chad Bowden.
Chad Bowden.
Oh,
Chad
really?
Bowden. Yes. The general manager of the Reds, what is that, Tom, 29 years ago?
Yep.
Was there, and I don't know that I interviewed him that day or anything. Of course, you don't get a lot of time with Chad Bowden either.
Yeah, I was going to say, we don't.
Yeah.
We
Who's he?
should have him on. Chad Bowden, pretty significant in this recruiting machine they have going here at Notre Dame. He's now I believe that's his title, the general manager of Notre Dame football. And there you go. I tied it together. 3 decades apart, still going.
Only in a way
Blessed.
you can.
Hashtag blessed.
Hashtag blessed. That is our pot of old for the week. We're going to speak up right now. And why Mike Berardino sits there and wonders, did we not spend more time on the fake punt call? Because
Yeah.
our question of the week comes from Brian Sanchi from Batavia, Illinois.
All right.
And he says, to you, Mr. Berardino,
Uh-oh.
what is your interpretation of the formation rule regarding Notre Dame's fake punt against Virginia?
Jeez. You know, the league office hasn't gotten back to me either. So the interpretation would be that's just a weird one, because Notre Dame did everything you have to do in advance of something that funky in the modern football world. Everything you could do right up to whispering in all, the head referee's ear right before, here, this is it, this is the one right here, because they let him, Marty Biaggi, according to Marcus Freeman, let it be known to the ACC officials in the summer. They showed them kind of maybe a video of what they had already been practicing. They've been practicing that. What's the fella's name? Brian, who asked the
Brian
question?
Sanchi.
Brian. They've been practicing that. Notre Dame has been practicing that fake punt, that particular version, since they had it ready for the bowl game.
The bowl game again.
We could have seen it
back in the Sun Bowl. You could have
the
seen that
Sun
in El
Bowl.
Paso.
If they needed it there, you might have seen it there. And then they had it, definitely brought it back out after Georgia Tech, because apparently that was that end around with the Jeremiah Love. Remember, Love in this version comes around, doesn't get the ball. So now they had to go pull out the second best fake punt, if that's their second best. And then this is what you saw. Yes, that rule, it makes sense that if it's not a kicking formation, that you would need, because in terms of deception, you would need to have people with numbers at least 50 all the way to 99 on your line. But Notre Dame did the due diligence in advance, showed them in August, mentioned it again before the game, couldn't show them a video of Marcus Freeman saying that it sounded like that's discouraged to come in and just be binge watching video of your practice with that day's officiating crew. Interesting to me that the head official.
Look at you rummaging through
well,
Going in his bag.
His fella's
Going in his
name
bag
is
of notes.
Elliot.
What's in Berardino's
The fella's
bag?
name is. I have the. Thing
That's our
here.
new segment.
Always
Yeah,
have it.
that's a new Berardino's
What's
bag.
in my bag? Here you go. Is that it? No, that's the wrong game. So this fella, Elliot.
Mr. Prepared.
Here it is. Yeah. They give this to us, and so then Justin Elliott's his name. He's the referee, unavailable for comment, I would imagine. But he's like he's worked for Facebook, and actually one of our cohorts in the past. He's the guy who got For the Win going at USA Today Network. He's a tech wizard, and he was so wizardly that he flagged Notre Dame, and his crew conferred and decided with all that advance notice that somehow that wasn't kosher. And it strikes me that if that was going to be a problem, it needed to be mentioned in August or maybe before the game by that officiating crew. So I'm not sure. I think they were just kind of on the intake. Okay, well, that's interesting. Yeah, okay, all right, great. And then as soon as they got a chance to flag it, they did.
Yeah.
That runs counter to the whole aspect of communication. What the telling thing is that Marcus Freeman, in his press conference on Monday, let it be known that they're still going to celebrate that in their film session. They thought it was a heck of a play. And I think, without going overboard with it, they feel like that shouldn't have been called back.
Here's my interpretation of it. It was such a genius play call that the officials looked at it and said, something about that just can't be right.
Yeah.
Whether it's Jack Kaiser lined up where he was lined up, whether it was Jordan Faison crouched down the way he was before the play, they looked at it and said, something about this play can't be right. We're going to have to call something. Let's call it a legal formation. Mm-hmm. When they ran it by the officiating crew, when they did and said, look, we may use this. Is there anything we need to know? They said no. And then when they ran it, they said, nope, you can't do that.
That's
The ball.
It was such a genius call
It's
that they
so
said,
good.
something's got to be screwed up with this, so we're throwing a flag.
Which is just,
It is.
It's just
It is.
ridiculous because ostensibly they had a look at it in August, and then they'd been reminded of the August conversation in the hours before the game, because that always happens. There's the referees, the officials do pop in, and they want to be known what to look for. Hey, we're watching this. We don't want to have any chippiness, whatever. And you let them know when you have something outside the normal scope that you don't want them to be freaked out by, throw a flag on, whatever. And it's just a shame. It really is, because
so good.
it electrified the stadium. Even Jason Garrett got excited.
He did. It was like, even Jason Garrett's got a pulse. Who knew? Who knew?
And it's not a touch. And here's the thing. You can't do it again.
Nope.
Yeah.
You can't do it again. Not this year.
Nope.
Probably not next year. There's almost like, who's going to forget that?
Yeah, because at first I thought it was the whole Faison kind of crouching down. I'm like, can you crouch down and hide behind the line of scrimmage? It was such a genius play call. It was just, I can't believe that no one said when you brought this up, hey, the reminder about the numbers. You did everything right. You're right. They did communicated everything perfectly. And
here's the other thing that now that I think of, well, that shouldn't matter. Because, I see. Yeah, because your long snapper, Notre Dame has long snapper. Joseph Vinci's the long snapper, by the way, on the punts now. It's not Andrew Cross. The last 3 games, haven't done a TTP on it yet. Been giving a lot of love to the special teams.
Jackson's like, what are you talking
to
about?
the point, we call it. It's just a little quick version of, kind of a note.
Yes,
But we don't call it that. We have little special abbreviations for everything. But this Vinci, number 46, he was there snapping, and he's a little taller than certainly than Reno Monteforte, the short snapper, and certainly taller than Andrew Cross. And that might have played a factor into it too. It's easier to hide behind a long snapper who sits a little higher.
Yeah.
Think of like an SUV versus a
sedan.
Yugo. Anyway.
All right, it's 62 degrees outside. I'm looking out the window. The sun's out.
Can't look out the window.
You've got access tonight for football. I've got a basketball game, so I want to get outside for a little bit. We're going to wrap up this show. Let's go to Pot of Bold. Easiest explanatory segment. Give me one hot take, one score prediction. I'm going first because I know both of you are going to be like,
I have mine ready.
You're ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, well, you'll go second.
Okay.
Army is allowing entire teams, to rush for 82.6 yards per game. I think somebody on the Notre Dame football roster, Jeremiah Love, runs for more than 82.6 yards. Notre Dame 34, Army West Point 13. Notre Dame has come too far and is too close to a possible college football playoff berth to play the part in a baseball stadium of the closer who coughs up a game and or a lead with late control issues. Notre Dame 34, Army West Point 13. Jackson, what do you got?
I'm going similar, something with Jeremiah Love. I think this is the best running back Army's going to face all season long by pretty wide margin. I'm going to say he matches Riley Leonard's touchdown total from that Purdue game. I'm saying 3 touchdowns for Jeremiah Love. Extends that streak to 11 straight games that he's scored in right now, and then Notre Dame wins 27-10.
What do you got, Mike B?
That'd be 11 straight on the ground, and don't forget his receiving touchdown in El Paso. So it's a little funky, but 11 straight on. It would be 11 straight on the ground, 12 straight
tying the record
total games, and so he's just gone. He's gone off.
You got a 75-yard punt from James Rendell in
do
there?
that, yeah.
Huh?
No, we're still waiting on that, but he got to 64.
I did see that.
I
Got
I was
64. He was a special teams player of the week in a week in which they had the fake punt to end all fake punts. I'm going to say 45-10. Notre Dame, not much drama in this one either. And the hot take would be Riley Leonard, after not running a whole lot last week, will get his 2 rushing touchdowns to pass friend of the program, Brandon Wimbush, most rushing touchdowns in a season by a Notre Dame quarterback. Needs 1 to tie, 2 to pass. I say makes the history this weekend at Yankee Stadium.
There you go. Pot of gold for the week. We'll be back next Tuesday, early edition because of Thanksgiving. We'll preview USC. We'll review, maybe more than we did with Virginia this week.
Maybe.
We'll review Army and
We'll
Notre
see.
Dame. For Mike Berardino, for Jackson Neal, I'm Tom Noy. This is Pot of Gold.
This has been the South Bend Tribune's Pot of Gold podcast, your home for insightful Notre Dame football coverage and analysis.